Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because, let's be honest, we are tackling something that literally everyone struggles with at some point, that totally exhausting pursuit of control. Today, we're diving deep into exactly why trust creates inner peace. We're going to break down a really fascinating faith-based framework from a recent source by Bible Fix. And you know what's so compelling about this material? It systematically deconstructs our modern, everyday anxieties and actually maps out a path to genuine inner peace. We're going to examine how this text frames absolute surrender, not as some kind of weakness, but actually as the ultimate strategy for true resilience. Now, the source opens with this absolute gut punch of a hook that gets right to the heart of the matter. It asks, do you trust with your worship but not your worries? Think about that for a second. It highlights this pretty wild contradiction. So many people claim to have faith, right? Yet they lie awake at 2 a.m., completely sweating the details of tomorrow. It's that universal problem of late-night anxiety. We might declare that a higher power is in control, but our racing thoughts and completely stressed-out nervous systems, yeah, they tell a totally different story. So how do we actually fix this? Well, the source offers a really profound redefinition of trust. According to the text, trust isn't just some magic wand that instantly makes your life perfect overnight. Not at all. Instead, it defines trust as simply stopping carrying burdens you were never actually meant to carry alone. It's making that conscious decision to just put down the emotional weight. In our explainer today, we are going to break down the exact step-by-step shifts that happen when someone actually adopts this mindset. Okay, let's jump straight into it. Section 1, Finding Peace in Chaos. Take a look at this setup. It's a really fascinating contrast. On the left side, you've got the standard secular view of the world. Peace comes from having control. The idea is if you have enough money in the bank, enough planning, enough certainty, then you can finally relax. But over on the right, the source presents a radically different paradigm. Peace comes from trusting God. The text points out that this perfectly explains why two people can face the exact same life storm, like, say, a job loss or crazy health crisis, and have completely different reactions. One person completely falls apart because they've lost control over their circumstances, while the other stays totally calm because their peace is anchored in something outside of those circumstances. The source actually grounds this whole idea in a specific biblical text, Isaiah 26:3, which reads, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." Now, the main takeaway they want us to see here is that peace is promised as an internal shift. It absolutely does not promise an immediate end to whatever external problem you're facing. God doesn't always just magically remove the storm immediately. Sometimes the real miracle is the unshakable peace provided inside the storm. And they illustrate this concept with an analogy that I think absolutely hits the nail on the head. Imagine you're on an airplane and it suddenly hits some severe turbulence. Look at the left side. You've got the panicking passenger who is trusting their circumstances. They're focused on the shaking cabin, the scary noises. But on the right, you have the calm passenger who is trusting the pilot. The moment you hear the pilot's calm, steady voice over the intercom, your fear naturally decreases, even though the plane itself is still shaking just as much. The source basically argues that knowing who is flying the plane dictates our emotional state in life, no matter how bumpy the ride gets. Moving right along to Section 2, Direction Through the Fog. So the text uses this super modern analogy that makes so much sense. Think about driving your car through really thick fog at night. You can literally only see a few feet ahead of your bumper. If you're relying entirely on your own vision, it's completely terrifying, right? But if you have a GPS running, it already knows the entire route. The source compares our limited human perspective to that stressed-out driver in the fog, while God's wisdom acts as the GPS. We only see the immediate present moment, but a higher power sees the entire map. To really hammer this point home, the source brings up the biblical story of Joseph. Just look at this timeline for a second. At year 1, he's betrayed by his own brothers. By year 2, he is literally sold into slavery. Flash forward to year 10, he's falsely accused and thrown into prison. Now, from a limited perspective, this looks like an absolutely chaotic string of terrible, isolated tragedies. But by year 13, he becomes second in command in all of Egypt, saving countless lives. The source uses this to argue that what looks like a terrible, random setback in the fog is actually a highly calculated setup in the grand design. Which leads us straight into Section 3, Dropping the Heavy Backpack. You know that epidemic of burnout we are all constantly hearing about and honestly probably feeling? Well, the source addresses that by pointing straight to Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Notice the specific offer being made here. The text emphasizes that the offer is simply rest. It's not a demand for more pressure, it's not a call for more hustle, or telling you to just figure it out. It is an open invitation to literally put the burden down. And the imagery they use here is honestly so incredibly relatable. Look on the left. Imagine a tiny child just struggling, completely weighed down by this massive, overloaded backpack. That is exactly how so many of us live our lives mentally and emotionally. Now look at the right side. A loving father wouldn't just stand there and watch his kids struggle. He would step right in and carry that weight for them. The text makes the argument that the only reason we refuse to let the father carry the backpack is because of a totally false belief. We somehow trick ourselves into thinking that worrying is a form of control. So here's the crucial point, and it all boils down to one number: 0. According to the source, the exact amount of tomorrow's problems that get fixed by you worrying about them today, yep, it's exactly 0. Worrying just steals your peace today without doing a single thing to change tomorrow. Dropping that backpack means surrendering that illusion entirely. All right, let's look at section 4, letting go of fear. To visually break down how fear actually works, the source uses the story of Peter walking on water, and they frame it as a very simple 2-step process. Step 1, as long as Peter keeps his focus strictly on the source of his power, Jesus, he literally walks right above the waves. He completely defies the chaos around him. But look what happens in step 2. The very second he shifts his focus to the wind and the crashing storm, he immediately starts sinking. The source powerfully notes that this is exactly how fear operates in our lives. It shifts our focus away from the power and straight onto our problems, causing us to essentially emotionally drown. Now, you might be wondering, what happens when the absolute worst does actually happen? The source doesn't shy away from this at all. They bring up the story of Job, a guy who literally lost his health, his wealth, and his family. And yet, in chapter 13, Job says, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." The text uses this intense story to highlight a really vital nuance. True trust isn't about believing you're somehow going to avoid all hardship. No way. It's about maintaining hope and knowing you aren't abandoned, even when you're in the middle of unimaginable pain. The source lays out this really powerful trio of metaphors to explain the why behind these hardships. Gold is refined through fire. Muscles grow through resistance, and faith grows through testing. The source frames difficult seasons not as some kind of proof that you've been abandoned, but as the exact forge where profound, lasting resilience is shaped. Basically, the struggle you absolutely hate today is developing the exact strength you are going to need tomorrow. Finally, let's head into section 5, witnessing a transformed life. The text fires off this amazing list of historical accounts to show what supposedly happens when you completely drop that self-reliance. Just look at these examples, all tied to absolute trust. Moses trusting in the Red Sea parting, Joshua trusting in the walls of Jericho falling, Peter walking on the water, the woman with the issue of blood being healed. The source uses these to illustrate that letting go of control isn't just some passive giving up thing. Actually, scratch that. It actively positions people to witness powerful transformations that they literally could never have engineered on their own. To really wrap up this whole expanded mindset, the text points over to Ephesians 3:20. God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. The argument here is that when you genuinely choose to trust, your entire internal dialogue shifts. You stop operating from this limited place of God probably can't, or there's no way this will ever work out, and you shift to a baseline assumption of God is able. And that, for sure, completely rewires how you approach every single day. So let's just take a second to summarize the core takeaways from this whole framework. According to the source, the complete journey from total anxiety to profound resilience basically looks like this. You find peace in chaos because you're trusting the pilot. Your path is directed because you trust the GPS. Fear loses its power because you're focusing on power, not the problems. Your burdens become lighter because you're letting the Father carry that heavy backpack. And ultimately, your faith grows stronger because you understand that the resistance is just building your spiritual muscles. Which honestly leaves us with one final pretty provocative question to consider today, straight from the source's own challenge to its audience. Are you ready to let go of control today? If the framework we just explored holds true, the exhaustion you are feeling right now might actually be completely optional. It might just be time to drop that heavy backpack and finally step into some genuine inner peace. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown sparked some great insights for you, and I will see you all next time.